you who don't know, we are an employee-owned custom software design and development consultancy. Basically, what that means is clients come to us across all different types of business sizes and industries. They have a tricky problem that they can't buy software for, and they need it made from scratch. And we have teams of developers and designers who work together to get something made. A couple examples of some fun projects. They're illustrated behind you. But yeah, we feel like over our past 17 years, we've really benefited from the constant inflow of information and learning that kind of is generated in this cool Meetup community in Ann Arbor. So we're really just happy to host you. So looking forward to more.
Awesome. Thank you very much.
Thanks for having us.
Yep, and we will definitely be back. We are, let's see, next month is March. We are at the Work and Tile. Ed will be giving a talk on ARM.
Something about ARM.
Not your arms or his arms, which aren't that great. And then the month after that is April, right? We will be at Ithaca, and there will be a talk by Brian Nusakowski, I believe, on Vault, his past year with Vault. So that one should be a big one. Without further ado, Ralph on Kubernetes.
Hello, my name's Ralph. I'm currently the support manager at Heptio, which is an open source company dedicated to the cloud native space, actually. I've spent, previous to this, I worked as a support manager and application engineer at a company that did Ruby on Rail apps as a platform as a service, which led into working with Deis, OpenDeis. We purchased them and then they got sold off and some other things. So we dealt with them as a support organization and dealt early on with some of Docker and using Fleet, and then further on to Kubernetes and OpenDeis. And then before that, I worked at Liquid Web as a system administrator and network administrator. So the way that I kind of put the session together was it's going to be interrupt on the topics that are on the slides. So the topics that I put in there are pretty low level. A lot of areas that we see folks kind of get tripped up into a production deployment sort of scenario, and then weird kind of edge case sorts of things. Cloud, bare metal, storage, networking, etcd, IP address management, and then the interfaces, high availability, bootstrapping, and then Kubernetes itself. So kind of bottom up is how I'm working. I guess it probably comes from being a sysadmin. So the two main places are, where's your infrastructure? Is it on-premise or is it in the cloud? Folks have questions about that? Anyone?
Both.
Both?
I'm in packet. We do bare metal in the cloud.
Oh, very cool. So for my experience is usually bare metal is going to be 9 times out of 10 a more difficult production level deployment than having the amount of money that Amazon, Google, and Microsoft have spent for storage solutions, load balancing. There's not super great load balancing. There's a project called MetalLB, which is fairly new. It's still technically in alpha stage, but basically it's a load balancer for your on-premise, and it can either work with BGP or ARP to actually broadcast out those load balancers. It came from Google somewhere, but that's one of the only projects I've seen to not have to use a node port. Do you have a?
There's also the WebB cloud provider. We'll go this way. The LB is, I wouldn't use it on-prem yet with top of rack switches until the next release.
Yeah, the Calico is still being like kind of pushed out because of the weird BGP interplay between those two.
How about hybrid?
So we're usually, are you doing hybrid where you want?
So I'm doing bare metal and running into the difficulties you're mentioning. My boss doesn't want to spend as much in the cloud, so I'm looking at a flex option where added resources, right? Because you lose the idea of cloud native. Okay, I have 10 servers, so you get to scale up to 10 servers with the resources. When I want to scale beyond, I want to go up to AWS and do things there. And I'm curious if I could encompass it all in one, or if I have to send it across to a different server.
You mean you want to join nodes to your cluster that are in the cloud?
I wouldn't recommend
No.
it. You're going to have some weird routing issues. I mean, I guess you can put an overlay network, but you're still going to have, depending on, I mean, I guess you could do pod affinity as well, so that you could make sure that certain nodes were just getting certain workloads.
Yeah.
But I would definitely probably just recommend 2 different Kubernetes clusters, to be honest. And you're going to also get some weird latency issues depending on where you're hosting and things like that.
We're just starting with COPS and AWS, running into some things that trying to put it in an existing VPC, not being able to pass in CIDR blocks with subnets, at least not up front. And I think they're addressing some of this in a newer release of COPS, but I have yet to see when or if that's coming, the 1.9 version, I think.
So I know that some of, I use kubeadm a lot for bare metal. It works very well. It actually works pretty well in the cloud, minus having to pass some of the weird cloud provider specifics. But the CIDR actual sending, you should be able to, I think they're moving to kubeadm as their provisioner at some point.
Oh, really?
Which might be one of the things that's happening to address that. I do know that you can stop, the API server should be able to accept that flag, and you should be able to then like fix it after.
Yeah, so what I'm doing to get around it, which is it's not super awesome, but it's the way I figured out, was to create the config. Then I do a replace using a config I've provisioned with the things I want.
Yeah.
And then I update the cluster with that. And that seems to work. I would like it if I could actually pass in what I want up front, but it is what it is.
There's some.
Try the, you can write out the YAML manifest.
I did not.
That's what I do. Steve has half up.
So we have AWS existing VPC, and we use COPS, and you can. It's not super great documented, but you totally can do that without. You can just launch it directly without having to have an intermediate.
Oh, you can
massage step.
You can launch it from that file that you're getting at. From your config file that you make up that has things in it.
Yeah, the comps commands and stuff. If you pass all the crazy options and stuff.
I would love to see info about that. How would I get that?
I can. I don't have it memorized, but
yeah. How about if I give an email address? Does that sound good at the end or something? I'll come and talk to you.
Yeah, I can
oh,
put
right.
some stuff in the
That's
Orchestructure Slack.
That's cool. That works. Thank you.
Yeah, that's been since COPS 1.7 that we've been on that.
Yeah, we've been battling it. We're brand new to it. We don't have access to the preview to try out the hosted one, and sort of decided to go on this path for now. We started in Azure first, and that was sometimes a little better, but sometimes not great too, because all our other stuff's in AWS. So anyway, I appreciate it.
I'll move on to the next one, which are on-prem and to a point in the cloud too, storage and physical networking. Storage mostly 100% solved in the cloud. EBS works beautifully, and for a lot of things takes care of most of the problems that you would have with stateful loads. On-prem, it's again a different story. There's Rook, which is a pretty cool project. It seems a little magical, but it is definitely interesting to play around with.
Is anyone using Rook in production? Sorry, that I just threw out.
Is that your suggested storage for on-prem?
So one of the things that at this point, until it possibly goes as a sysadmin, I disclaimer this with, it depends. And also I like new tech, but putting it in production as a support and sysadmin person doesn't really feel great to me. So for a lot of stateful set things, there's external name, which is what I would probably leverage, which is basically you can, similar to a load balancer, you can set a DNS name internally to your Kubernetes cluster and then access that as though it were a service within the cluster itself.
That's for the networking side of things?
So
That sounds more like a network problem than a storage problem.
well, if you're thinking of stateful sets, the big ones that are going to do that are databases. And putting a database on something that moves a lot is probably not great, and is not the amount of bang for your buck of moving a traditional database server and object store such as that is probably just easier to leave there and just call out to from your cluster instead of dealing with the storage aspect on it.
Okay, yeah, because we're running Gluster as our backend, and it's been decent enough in dev. Obviously, that's scaled up to a production size thing, but it gives you multiple resistant storage.
Yeah.
Do you have problems with Gluster at all?
So Gluster, I've seen where if you're moving pods a lot, it won't clean up the file paths depending on how you're mounting inside of the pods themselves, and then you'll get a ton of errors in your logs that just scroll with not being able to view basically a block that it can't read. I think that's getting fixed, and there's a few bugs for the Gluster operator within Kubernetes right now that I've like bug reports. So also just keep up to date with your version of Kubernetes that you're using for production.
Essentially, though, that could just be NFS or something, right?
Yep.
I'm finding the NFS examples to not be awesome, though. However, I think I ended up in some personal guy's GitHub with like an NFS thing nested in deep to get it to work. I didn't.
It's got like 7 stars,
Yeah, and then like
4 issues.
let's answer his question about Rook is backed by Ceph.
Oh, it is that.
Yeah,
Okay.
so it's basically Ceph and having Kubernetes doing all the quote unquote heavy lifting. And like the first time I ran it, it worked totally also on my home lab. It worked totally awesome. And then I went in there and there was stuff in that cluster running everywhere. And it was, I felt like, what have I done? But it all worked. Yeah, but it almost felt, yeah, I don't want to just come out as criticism, but it almost felt too magical. I was like, what just happened? I just applied one thing and then kablamo.
Yeah, with Gluster, they have Heptio, and it does the cluster configure. So you install the client on the host, run your deploy, run your JSON that defines where the disks live, and then boom, it makes you a cluster.
Mm-hmm.
If something breaks in that cluster, actually build it. So
yeah,
it's great if it breaks.
And then,
a lot of the storage guys also looking to extend the CSI.
Yeah, I was going to say, should we mention the CSI?
Yeah, the container storage interface, that's beta now, or is that alpha?
I thought it was still.
Beta?
Oh, it is beta. I thought it was still an alpha.
But like they're shipping out like a lot of the storage plugins and all that just to use the CSI interface. And I know a lot of the sort of storage products and groups have basically been planning on migrating. It's alpha, okay. Planning on migrating to use that. And we sort of see that with a lot of stuff being shipped out at Kubernetes core. The other thing.
The nice thing is all the storage companies are working around CSI. So if you have like a SAN or something,
it's like a CNI for
everything. And it is alpha, yes, sure. As of January, so does that mean it'll go beta in March?
It may go beta.
It's like the Kubernetes steering committee right here.
I know.
It's possible. So the weird thing about alpha is it is supposed to, or I think that's the aim, but it doesn't always go alpha beta in one release cycle.
Yeah.
One thing, like since CSI is like such a big thing, I suspect that we'll probably. I think there's enough like the forces behind it.
Yeah, and on the same topic.
Yeah, and that was the.
Yeah.
Apparently.
So, Rob, one thing a lot of people don't understand is OCI, cryo, and the differentiator there. Like, what are those things? Maybe clear that up for people. So those are. So I know cryo is the CRIO container. Actually, forget its acronym, but basically it's. Yeah, but what's the O?
Is it open? Basically, it's a compliant non-Docker container that's meant for Kubernetes. Basically, relying on a company and breaking changes depending on where they happen and how they happen. I believe Red Hat is managing that project and are working closely to keep CRIO so that each version of Kubernetes has a specific version of a container runtime so that you're not forced to go through the changelog and verify if the Docker version you want to use with the features you want to use are actually supported. You have to go into the changelog and go to external dependencies and then verify, hey, does 1706 work with the new version of Kubernetes? Nope, it currently doesn't. I personally have been a big fan of 1.12.6 for Docker, which ships with CentOS with overlay 2. It seems incredibly stable. It may be old, but it does not do anything funky as I beat the heck out of my cluster. Questions on storage engines or networking for the container itself?
Which of the networking solutions on bare metal do you suggest? Because I think I'm running Flannel right now. We ran a couple different tests and they all just kind of worked. And so we just stopped with the one that worked.
So I use Calico. That's what we suggest as a company. And also what I use personally. One of the things that's very nice about it is network policies built into it, so you don't need a second operator to control any of your security between containers. Flannel, I don't believe, has container networking. That's why you have the Canal project, which is Calico and Flannel put together, and Calico is just used for security. So if you put any network operators and network security policies where you didn't want egress from a specific pod or a specific namespace, it wouldn't be enforced by Flannel.
Oh, my bad. Okay. Sorry.
And then the other nice part about Calico is it speaks BGP, so you can peer it to other places. Top of the rack is a place that's been done. And also, as things progress, you're able to use Bird, which is what it uses for BGP, and you're able to use some routing preferences that you would use at the network level for your data center, which your network folks are probably familiar with BGP.
Sure. We're not going outside there.
So I haven't done much with this specifically with cops, but we are locking down our NACLs and our security groups. I've added extra security groups with what I want to the cluster, so it adds it to each node and the master. What do you recommend securing further using this as well? So that would be like a third layer, I guess.
Yeah, it's defense in depth. Yeah. It's basically the more layers of defense,
right,
the less likely that you've just missed a glaring hole somewhere along the path.
Right.
Versus like, oh, hey, I did this one thing here. Oh, but you forgot that. Sorry.
Yeah, I wonder if you border into the causing yourself more difficulty, troubleshooting things between them. I guess if you set it up correctly the first time. But.
Well, they're pretty. There's actually a few. I'll send you. There's actually a really awesome repository with diagrams and some other things of what the different security policies do. It's very similar to a firewall.
I love that. Yeah, thank you.
Nope. So the next ones, even though they don't seem like they go together, IP address management and etcd, I put them together because Calico uses etcd, and then etcd is also used by Kubernetes as a state store. So at least 3, so that you're running a highly available etcd cluster that can get quorum, and then making sure that it's secure with TLS certs and things like that.
And you're running your etcd inside the Kubernetes cluster or outside?
So I actually prefer, well, it depends on the size of the cluster. Technically, you can run Calico with the Kubernetes API store on smaller clusters under like 50 nodes or so. Over that, we usually suggest a separate etcd cluster, just because, yes, they could be on the same cluster because they do have different namespaces, but just the security of sharing that state and sharing, since each node has to have access to the etcd cluster itself, it's not something that I tend to suggest.
What about the etcd operator? Is that a good idea?
I have not experimented with the etcd operator to be on there.
I can say good things about it.
Can you?
Yeah, it actually works pretty well. I use it for the Federation one.
So I've heard someone tell me that like you kind of want to keep separation of concern there.
Like
Keep your etcd out
keep it
outside of the cluster so that you have like a nice clean.
Well, like I'm using it to back a service that's completely dependent on it.
Okay.
So
Yeah, the Calico etcd, technically, as long as you know the IP address that it's going to reside at, which is why in the self-hosted Kubernetes kubadmin install, it's just a pod that gets given a service so that you know where it is. But other than that, it doesn't make a difference. You just need a place that can store it that has access. Once you get to a larger size, you do end up needing extra space and extra hardware performance to keep the IP address management of each pod, that sort of web, kept alive and put together nicely.
What sort of load are you seeing on the servers? I know that etcd is pretty light. But...
It depends on how often things are changing. There's not a, so it's one of those weird, like if you're constantly changing pods and services, where you're getting more than 1,000 changes a minute, you're going to start to see a significant load. But under that, it's pretty negligible. Questions? And then on cluster configuration, bootstrap and high availability, they go hand in hand. It depends on where you are. On the cloud, you can get away with a single master because you can live without a master for about 30 minutes or so, which on AWS, you can start a new server that's been backed in far less than 30 minutes.
By just moving the storage into a new...
You just stop and start the instance and it just comes back up with everything that's already there.
I'm pretty sure I know the answer to this, but KubeADM still doesn't do high availability.
It does not.
It does not.
Sorry, I don't.
You can fake high availability with kubadmin by.
So think about what you just said. Fake.
Well, so the fakeness is actually, it's not completely in KubeADM.
Yeah.
So when you bootstrap the master, before you add nodes, you take the certs and put them on your other masters.
Yeah.
And then you join it to whatever your load balancer is, and then put that as the IP address, and away you go.
Okay, so you stand up X number of nodes, put the one as the contact point, or put the load balancer in front of the one, and then share the keys to the others?
Yeah.
Excellent.
Yep, and it works just like high availability setup because it is. It's just that it's not completely automated. Yeah.
I'm looking for the documentation, but it sounds like kubadmin's not going to make HA this cycle.
No, I thought it was going to.
Yeah, I'm also disappointed. I'm just trying to find the actual documentation.
It is on the KubeADM roadmap actually to support high availability by default.
I can get one of their core developers to do a presentation so we can yell at them afterwards.
I mean, it's there. The plan's there. I think it's just a lot hairier than expected. Yeah. Is everyone on the Orchestructure Slack? So when I post links,
No, but I'll be asking it.
yeah. There's like a whole huge GitHub.
And then Kubernetes, which is a big whole topic, but have there any weird, odd questions that you'd like answered?
Largest cluster you see?
In a single one, right around 250
Nodes or cores?
nodes.
Okay.
They had like 24 cores on each of those boxes. They were gigantic things.
And was that on bare metal or?
Yeah.
Yeah, Bloomberg has like over 1,000 nodes per metal, mostly with a bunch of GPUs. I know they're at the on-prem thing. I know their base OS is all done using 1604, and they don't use CubeSpray.
What's the most common operating system you see being used?
It's either Cent or Ubuntu. It's one of those two. I prefer Cent myself. You don't like Cent?
Like some of the remotely recent kernel.
I don't.
Yeah, how does the kernel
On Cent 7.4, it's fine.
like what kernel is it?
Read
Read
Yeah.
Backwards.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it's backports.
Yeah. Okay, I get it.
It supports overlay too. That's all I care about.
It's 2.6.3.2.
Yeah.
That's Cent 4.7, I believe.
Which is probably still running all over the globe.
There's probably still a ton of it out there.
All your financial stuff, probably. Yeah.
How strongly do you suggest overlay? Because we're still using device manager.
Strongly. Because it'll do, I've had issues with AFS as well of just random lockups that can pretty much only be attributed to the overlay.
Is that seriously all? Surely we have more questions.
You said you preferred CentOS over Ubuntu. Core OS or any of the other kinds of micro OSs are not of interest?
Yeah, I've played with them. I have an issue with having to deal with extra installation of debugging tools. Personally, it's just kind of a
Like the fact that you have to install them?
yeah. As a container elsewhere outside of the OS. I spent 5 years on Gen 2.
Yeah.
So
Heptio versus Heptio, let's go.
Yeah.
everyone has
I have a
different.
question about the so how are people deploying that in a way that so I've done it obviously testing same cluster locally running kube control proxy, right, and hitting it via basic local 8 or 1 or whatever. But if you're doing this from a plane, you're deploying it out. How do you deploy that dashboard in a way that it's accessible on each cluster? Does that make sense? Each of the clusters, yeah. Look like clusters, and you can select namespace.
Was that me? No. Okay. I thought I was like.
I've had this issue with my Mac when didn't review the HDMI port, even though my OS.
Oh yeah, I had that problem too.
That's special. That's special.
Disconnect from the. Okay.
I'll do it now so someone. Yeah.
Manager the data lab for a reason, okay?
So what you're saying is, I put a little vanilla Linux box or container or whatever, and I have it run. Yeah. I was thinking about doing it already, but
So like for the dashboard, like I'm just creating a role for it and then spin it up if I ever need a GUI and proxy to it.
Or for those of us in the room who have not exposed Kubernetes to production, maybe is never show and manage it.
Okay, so I have two other ones. Equipment management. We're looking at using Column and Monocular to yeah, so I'm going to defer that to a little bit later. I want to get Jeff going on his presentation. We have until 7:30, which is a hard stop for tonight, which should be plenty of time for us to discuss things and whatnot. So, but also I love help. So thank you, Ralph. We got
Be fast so we can talk.
be in Slack as well.
I mean, mine's going to take maybe 10 minutes.
So Jeff is up next. He's going to talk about his home infrastructure, which is mostly legal and all done through Kubernetes. And then after that, we have Steve. So I'm going to just let this roll. After you guys are done, I'll do a couple quick announcements, and then we'll help with announcements and put up and kind of talk about those really quick. And then you want and chill out. So go ahead, Jeff.
Thank you. All right. My plan is to go super fast and just have a lot of fun because, I mean, we're talking about my home server closet. So here to talk about my home lab. As you'll see, it's kind of just a collection of stuff. Literally just a collection of stuff. You see my receiver. You see server right here. You see this archaic form of media down here, UPS. I mean, it's home lab and entertainment system. Keep that in mind. But it's mine. It is something that I take my... I do a lot of random stuff with it. Because, whoa. That is super bizarre. It's not just what's in that closet. It's actually stuff that is all over my house. That may be a really dusty PS3, but behind that is a Pi. And because everyone needs a cat tax, there's one of my 3 cats. Don't talk to me about it. Blame my wife. No, don't get me started. There are actually cat feeders that do that. So it doesn't seem like I have a lot. So what am I actually running on all of this? And mind you, I only showed you one of my Pis. Actually, quite a bit. I'm really only going to talk about the first few of these. However, if you want to talk to me about anything else on there, I could pretty much fill an entire talk on one of them. So that's why I'm kind of blazing through this. But the big thing is, come on, it's all highly available. And that's kind of a big deal when you're talking about Pi-hole, and we'll get to why. So this entire talk and idea started with a joke. If anyone has ever played a game called Dark Souls, you'll get this instantly. If not, Dark Souls is a game that makes people angry. It makes them angry not because it is a bad game, but it is a hard game, and when you die, it is entirely your fault because it... Well, you'll see. Hopefully this will play when I click it.
Nope.
Haha, it opened to a completely different window.
I saw it for a second.
Where am I at?
You came in on the right.
There I am. All right. I swear this will make sense. Okay, blocking the dude. Just kidding. You see that screen a lot. Now where's my mouse? There we go. So because of this, there's kind of a joke. Oh, man. Of course, now I'm the one that has trouble. There we go. There is kind of a joke around Dark Souls. Screw it. You know what we're going to do? I don't need we're going to mirror him. There we go. There we go. So if you're looking for help in Dark Souls, you're told to get good. Me on a Friday night, not having slept a lot. That seems like a really funny domain name to start. But I looked and there's not actually a .gud top level domain name, except if it's on my home network. So let's start custom DNS on my network. Thanks to George's lovely influence after a LAN party showing me that he's running this thing called Pi-hole. Pi-hole is a custom DNS server you can run at your house. What it does is it hijacks your DNS. It has a custom whitelist and blacklist, and anything that points to a known ad domain, it just throws to an Nginx server serving up a blank screen. So you have an ad blocker for your whole network without installing a thing. But on top of that is you can actually start your own custom DNS server. So we're part of the way there, and we got the added benefit of having an ad blocker. Now, because I tend to do a lot of stuff, I'm not sure if you can tell, but I'm scatterbrained. I'm also scatterbrained with my own personal projects. So I have a lot going on. So not only did I want to get repo at my house, I also wanted a full CI/CD setup so I could just not think about it. It's something that I've set up like multiple times at our job, multiple times for friends, and I just never had one at home. So I wanted something lightweight because the stuff was eventually going to be running on Pies on my server. Gogs is just a Golang-based GitHub clone, super lightweight, has all the features that you would expect. And Drone is a lightweight build pipeline. If you've used Travis, you can use Drone. It's at this point, a lot of them are just YAML file, how do you build? That's that. So at this point, we now have Kubernetes. Hopefully you all kind of guessed that this was all going to be on Kubernetes. We got Pi-hole, Get Good, Drone Good, and Grafana Good. But I said they were highly available. And I'm not sure if you realize that I have a mixed architecture set up. The server in my closet, the server in my closet is an x86, like it's a gaming rig that I turned into a home theater PC. So it's Intel. Pies are not Intel. Well, like I said, I'm scatterbrained and tend to do a lot of stuff. So I wrote an initializer for Kubernetes that will automatically detect a deployment or a pod trying to schedule on ARM, and if the deployment has a certain annotation to it, thank you, HiveMind, it will automatically hijack the pod, replace the pod spec with the ARM image, and then spin up. So now not only is Flannel running no matter what on ARM or x86, Pi-hole is as well. Because funny thing, if you have your entire network pointing at Pi-hole and then you upgrade Pi-hole and Pi-hole goes down and tries to pull the latest image, problems. So that was funny. This is just an example. Yeah. This is just an example of the initializer label that I have. This will work for anything, not just ARM. I made it multi-architecture, but I'm only using ARM. So you can say specifically what the node is reporting the architecture as. So that's dependent. If a node is reporting it as ARM, you need to set that. But if it's reporting it as ARCH, technically it's ARM, but you're going to need to add that as well. And then the container name within the pod. This will update both the container and the init container if you have one. And then with the new image that you want it to run. So I also said Grafana, and I never really touched on that. That's because I'm scatterbrained and I got a lot going on. So I have a bunch of stats coming off of my router into Prometheus, which is in Kubernetes, also monitoring my stuff. So you can actually see network traffic in and out. You can see the WAN in and out. That was actually when I was downloading the MP4 for that lovely video that I wound up just re-uploading. But you can see stuff like that. It's actually rather humorous when my wife gets home and starts watching Netflix. Shink, the bar goes up. This all started because while I was working on a completely separate project, I was actually DDoSing myself by hitting the Reddit API. I believe it was 1,000 times a second. And it was bad, man. Funny thing, that is actually why I couldn't present last month. It was not my router. It was not anything. It was because my Reddit project was pinging the Reddit API 1,000 times a second and was causing the modem to freak out and exhibit bizarre behavior.
Reddit didn't just shut you down.
So that's funny. That's funny. If you are giving them a user agent, and it could be garbage, it could be literally 5 A's, they'll let you hit it as hard as you want.
Wow.
I mean, 1,000 times a second, I was killing my bandwidth, not theirs. This is a quick dashboard that I have for my Kubernetes cluster, and this is actually across both ARM and my server. Yeah, because like I have a lot of stuff running, but not a lot of it's doing a whole lot unless I'm actually, you know, like working on something. So really this kind of comes to my point in all of this. I feel like we're just scratching the surface with Kubernetes. We talk about it a lot in infrastructure and enterprise because, I mean, that's where we're going to see the most benefit the fastest. But I also think that we can do a lot with Kubernetes just at home. Like I can do a lot. I didn't touch on any of my media stuff. I have Pis that when they plug in, they're automatically like a media PC, like they have the media PC label. So they'll start up all the media stuff I want on them. And I don't have to install anything. I like that because I'm super lazy. I think it's not just going to be an operating system for the data center. I think it'll be an operating system for your house to the point where everyone keeps talking about Kubernetes getting boring. I think it's going to be boring enough where people are using Kubernetes at their house and they don't even know it. I mean, if you look at like the PS3 was running Linux. Nobody really knew that unless you were a nerd. So if you have any questions or ideas for really crazy stuff I could do, I know you want to.
Basement Federation.
Basement Federation. Okay.
That's another conversation. Okay.
That can happen afterwards. But I will give the long story short. Bob is the Federation nerd in the room. And one of the things, I mean, he and I have been what's called the hive mind. We have been friends for a stupidly long time. We lived together for almost as long. And then I got married and we got divorced. That's what we call it. And then my wife and I moved 8 miles away, and then he moved less than a mile away from me. Go figure. So
do you have your YAML soup like on GitHub somewhere? Or? For all the services you're running in?
Actually, what
Do you use Helm?
No, not right now. I will happily show anyone and everyone after because I know we're time crunched.
Yeah,
I can like bring that stuff up afterwards.
Okay, cool.
But anyways, so he and I had a funny joke about we should just like erect 20-foot antennas and then share our Wi-Fi. Yeah, screw it. Eventually we are going to federate our households with Kubernetes, and because I have infrastructure that he can leverage.
He's going to send you 1,000 requests per second.
I mean, the thing is, he and I both have the same internet provider, so he's going to DDoS himself, not me.
Well, no, we found that doesn't work out too well for one different products.
That's
So
true.
thank you.
Yes.
Very much. Actually, that would be super useful. Jeff is super active in Slack, and he's at so you can talk to him here after. Or
Please bug me.
He's very open. Next we have Steve on and Spring Wall.
I'm going to stop sharing. Do you have AirPlay set up?
Oh, that was a thing, eh? Okay.
That is a thing.
To where?
Here, I got you. Look at that. I got you. They got directions.
This is not.
Where's my chair? Where's my chair?
Taking over there.
And Steve,
I grabbed your chair.
What the hell?
Take mine.
Okay.
I need to mute myself. That's me. Oh God, I'm on 2 different workspaces. Help me.
Do I need a code?
It's going to pop up on the screen behind you once you click it. Are you on Atomic S5?
Yeah.
Yeah. Have you chosen a 2 carbon?
4 or 5 times. Go. So this is the other thing. Is sophisticated AI is easy. AV hard. Okay. You know, like, there you go. Now we got a code.
796.
796.
Cool. Woo. Okay. So, all right. So my talk is not as cool as that. I have boring stuff that we're using in production. So, the thing is that, my name is Steve. I work at Ithaca across the street. So I commuted. It was really hard getting here. Now, if you've seen some of my other talks, usually I prepared this for about 24 hours ago. So I'm not going to do things like I did in the last one where I made the Statue of Liberty disappear. So this is more boring. But Ithaca is that most people haven't really heard of. We do JSTOR, like academic journals and stuff. And just as a sense of scale, we had 100 million unique visitors in 2017. In November, for instance, just to pick a random month, we had 30 million requests from Fastly, our CDN. We got about 1,000-ish AWS EC2 server instances, and we got about 100-ish engineers. So that adds up to large-ish cloud spend, which I feel like I don't want to embarrass anybody by big numbers, so I'm not sure if I'm allowed to tell them. But anyways, there's commas in there. The thing is that each one of our servers, our EC2 instances, has a 2 gigabyte overhead to it, and that's mostly for observability purposes, like for shipping logs and metrics and microservice tracing and all that kind of stuff. And so even if you assume that one of those servers is very highly utilized, which is definitely not the case for a lot of things, we end up wasting money. And so we're moving to Kubernetes off of the Netflix open source stack as a way of, we also built our own platform as a service. Like everybody else, we reinvented Heroku. Yay. So we're moving to Kubernetes because that will let us achieve near optimal CPU utilization for CPU, memory, and I/O. But even with that, we don't want to necessarily waste the overhead of shipping all those logs and all the other kind of overhead per server, per Kubernetes thing. So the standard way that a lot of people in Kubernetes end up actually collect logs is that they often use Fluentd, and they usually ship them to Elasticsearch, but you can go anywhere you want to. And that works great. And if you were going to go into production, that's a great way to go. The problem is that it, I don't know. Teacups at home. Anyways, it must be tea time somewhere.
Oh my God, there was someone else on the Hangouts, and they were making dinner apparently.
All right. That's good.
I force muted them, so that's fun. Sorry.
No, totally cool. That's fine. That's good. Yeah, that might be good. That's not the button to do that. Hang on. So, and I can even zoom in. So the thing is that so if you got your 12-factor app, log collection is one of the main principles. Is the 11th principle, and in general, it's great to try to ship structured log messages, but that doesn't always work. You got stack traces and other sorts of things. So we looked at Fluentbit, and we are betting on that. It works in production right now for us, and the advantages of it is it uses about 1/10 of the resources, both memory and CPU, of other solutions. We have a homegrown thing that uses even more than that, but this is cool. It has extraordinary throughput and resiliency and reliability, and it's also it does support multi-line, like a stack trace as a single message, so it can deal with that in a reasonable way. Not every language has a wonderful detector all set up for it, where with Fluentd, there is such a thing. that works for even really obscure languages. But I'm sure it'll get there. It also can enrich the log messages with Kubernetes metadata if you want that. It gives us our apps we can annotate those to suggest the appropriate parser for those log messages, so it can have better understanding of those things. For instance, if you want to say like, okay, this is a Java app, and the stack traces you're going to look like a Java stack trace. Keep those together as one message, please. You can just do that. With other providers, log collection agents, you got to jump through a lot more hoops, and there's guesswork, and occasionally it goes wrong. And oh, I thought that was an Elixir message. That was Java? Well, I'm going to mess that up. So the other thing, it comes out of the box instrumented with Prometheus metrics. You can output to Elasticsearch or Kafka, which is what we typically do. You can go to Fluentd, and then there's like 500 plugins to go wherever you feel like, and lots of other nice plugins. The other thing you can do is you can also use it to ship metrics like CPU, memory, and disk usage directly to InfluxDB. So you only need to run this tiny little thing that really, and by tiny, I mean like this is giving it a generous amount of extra CPU and memory request and limits. So if you use a small portion of a CPU, you can use, here, I can make this actually readably large. So 10 megs, I have not actually seen it in production, even when we're shipping extraordinary volumes through, used all of that. It's dependent upon buffer sizes and other sorts of things, but it works pretty darn well. Fluentd, for instance, by comparison, uses 10 times as much. These are directly from the canonical sources that are recommended in production from other places. People who are not using Kubernetes, if they're shipping to Elasticsearch, they're often using FileBeat or Logstash. And just as a comparison for that, you can run that in Kubernetes as well. But Fluentbit is actually pretty awesome. And that's really kind of all I needed to talk about. I ended up actually putting like a couple days worth of content in here if you're interested, and I'll just link that. But for the long term, we really think that that's going to be where the future is. It works great in production now. It has the documentation is not amazing, and there are still it doesn't have every single plugin you could possibly want. So as an escape hatch, you can always ship it over to Fluentd and then get it wherever you want from there. Like if you want to produce directly to S3 or want to have it go somewhere else, you can use Fluentbit as a leaf aggregator and then have routing or pre-digest handled by Fluentd. So anyways, that's it. Are there any questions?
You mentioned in your first list, you had the TLDR to use the dev version. Can you give a reason why that is?
Yeah. So the released version has a lot of great stuff in it, but I've worked with the developer who's from Chile, and there are so many cool things that are now production ready, like the Kubernetes filter that provide any, the people who have examined it before, it was fine, but it didn't have, there were too many rough edges to try to use it in production. You ended up having to, after you've collected the data or the log messages, do some other processing somewhere else to reconstruct stuff. Like, okay, great, I have this random log message that there was an error that occurred. But in a multi-tenant environment, that particular stack trace is just unstructured messages. So what thing created that? What app is crashing right now? I don't know where that came from. So without the Kubernetes metadata enriching those log messages for unstructured log data, it kind of sucked. And that's not just unique to this particular solution. In fact, that's actually a widespread common thing. Like, yay, everything went to Elasticsearch. Cool, I can see there's a whole bunch of stuff that's crashing. I don't know where they're crashing from, but that looks like Python. Oh, I see a line I remember. That's probably from this repo. Like, that's kind of not a good story, right? So this is actually that's
So that branch adds like the Kubernetes annotations.
it's got the Kubernetes annotations. It produces to Kafka, which the old one didn't. It's got the Prometheus metrics instrumentation. It's got like 15 other things that I'm like that I would be really sad to not have in Kubernetes. If you're not in Kubernetes, then actually, and if you're not going to Kafka, then the released one's fine. Then go with it. But the other thing that's cool is this works really well and does support multi-arch. So if you wanted to actually use this as a log collection on a Raspberry Pi outside of Kubernetes, it's great for that. It was where it was originally came from. I can't say enough good things about it. The release should come out in the next few days. There is a one showstopper producing to Elasticsearch under extraordinarily high volumes. Occasionally, there's an intermittent problem that they're trying to stamp out that they don't want to ship it with. But I assume that that's going to get, there's a lot of people that are all like, oh, that is so weird, once in a blue moon. So I'm sure someone who's an Elasticsearch expert will eventually track that down. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Steve.
Cool.
A couple really quick announcements. Okay, cool. Yep, thank you. I know everyone's probably really hot and wants to leave, but I have just a couple quick things, and then you can go forth and conquer. We are planning a workshop, a Saturday workshop, 2 to 4 hours. It's something we're talking about end of March, early April, possibly. We'll see. We're still throwing around the idea, but we want to enable everyone to kind of come together and learn something that they haven't dug into, that they haven't had time to look into. How do you get your infrastructure like Jeff? How do you get your logs like Steve? How do you do whatever George does? I don't know. Yeah, he doesn't do much. Yeah. So we're looking at that. We're talking about it. If you have ideas, come to me, shoot them my way, or talk to Bob or George, the co-organizers here. Help us out there. We're also talking about doing a LAN party, an Orchestructure LAN party. There's a location on Ellsworth that we're, digital ops, and they have lots of space, and we like playing games. So that might be something coming up as well. If you have ideas or are interested, come and talk to one of us. We are looking for, we have talks planned through June, which is awesome, but we're looking for people that have awesome lightning talks about cool stuff that you're doing on the weekends, after work, etc. If you have something, don't be afraid to share it. Someone's probably interested in what you're doing, right? Next meeting is at the Work and Tile, which is downtown. I don't know the exact address. And we have some, thank you, George, for bringing those Kubernetes up and running. I think that's the first chapter or part of it.
Random chapters.
Yeah, so Kubernetes up and running is an O'Reilly book from the creators, Joe Beta, Brendan Burns, and Kelsey Hightower. And it is everything you need to know about Kubernetes, and it's a fantastic book. So definitely take one, read a little bit. You can probably download it for free on the internet, but don't do that because those guys are really awesome. I think that's all I have. If anyone has any announcements about your hiring, you're interested in something, or you want to talk about a certain topic, feel free to bring it up. If not, go ahead.
Is there a sign-up sheet for Orchestructure Slack?
There is not. Yeah, so it's the
email invite.
Yeah, so it's link in not Slack. Wow, that wouldn't work. Link it in the Meetup on the Meetup page. mainday2.com/Slack. You put your email in, it sends you an invite, and then you can get in and join the Orchestructure channel.
I feel like we should put
There's a link.
Yeah.
I thought it was in the bottom of the Meetup page.
Yeah.
It should be at the bottom of the Meetup page as well. Yeah. So yeah, double check on that, George. So I think that's it. So thank you very much, guys. Thank you to Atomic Object. Get some more pizza. Have safe travels back home. Have a good one. Thank you.
Oh, yeah.